She was nobody, just a girl struggling to survive in a forgotten town by a dying river. But one scorching afternoon, she made a choice that everyone said would destroy her. She gave water to a man the entire town feared and avoided. She didn't know he carried a secret powerful enough to change her destiny forever. What happened next will move you to tears. Before we begin, please like, comment, share, and subscribe so you never miss stories that restore your faith in humanity. Let's begin. The town of Abodo sat along a tired river that once rushed with life, but now barely whispered through cracked earth. Dust hung in the air like smoke, and the sun pressed down on tin roofs with merciless heat. In a compound at the edge of town lived a girl named Amadi. She was 17, thin from too many missed meals, but her eyes carried a strength that poverty couldn't touch. Every morning before dawn, she woke to fetch water for her mother, who lay sick on a worn mat, and her younger brother Kachi, who was only 9. Their father had died 3 years ago, leaving them with nothing but each other. Amadi worked odd jobs, washing clothes, sweeping compounds, carrying loads for market women. The money was never enough, but she never complained. She simply moved through each day with quiet determination, invisible to most people, noticed by none. The dry season was coming. Everyone could feel it. The river was shrinking daily, pulling back like a dying breath. Near the dried riverbank, under the shade of a dying acacia tree, lived an old man no one spoke to. He had appeared in the town 2 years ago, walking slowly, his clothes torn, his eyes distant. No one knew his name. No one asked. Children ran past him with wide eyes. Women crossed to the other side of the road. Men spat on the ground and muttered warnings. The elders said he was cursed, that he carried misfortune like a disease. Some claimed he had buried his family with dark magic. Others whispered he had been a thief who angered the gods. No story matched, but every story ended the same way. Stay away from him or suffer. He slept on cardboard near the riverbank. He ate scraps from garbage piles. He spoke to no one, and no one spoke to him. His skin was dark and weathered like old leather. His hair had turned completely white. He moved slowly, painfully, as though every step cost him something. And yet, despite everything, his eyes still held something human. Something broken, but still breathing. The town feared him, but the town had forgotten to see him. One afternoon, the sun burned hotter than usual. Amadi had walked nearly 2 miles to the communal tap where the town collected water. The line was long, and people pushed and argued over every bucket. When her turn finally came, she filled her single plastic container, 20 liters, barely enough for cooking, drinking, and her mother's medicine. She balanced it carefully on her head and began the long walk home. Her arms ached. Her legs trembled, but she kept moving. Halfway home, she passed the riverbank. That's when she saw him. The old man had collapsed near the tree, his body crumpled in the dust. His chest rose and fell rapidly. His lips were cracked and bleeding. No one stopped. A motorcycle zoomed past, kicking up dirt. A woman with a basket glanced over, then looked away quickly. Amadi slowed her steps. Her container felt heavier now. She looked at the water, then at the man, then back at the water. Her family needed every drop. Her mother's fever hadn't broken in 2 days. Kachi had complained of thirst that morning, but the man was dying. She lowered the container from her head and set it down gently. Her hand shook as she untied the small cup hanging from the side. She knelt beside the old man, her knees pressing into the hot dust. "Sir," she whispered, "please drink." His eyes opened slowly, clouded and confused. He stared at her as if she were a dream. She lifted the cup to his cracked lips and tilted it carefully. He drank in small, desperate gulps. Water spilled down his chin, but he didn't stop. When the cup was empty, she filled it again. He drank that too. His breathing slowed. His eyes cleared slightly. "Thank you," he rasped, his voice like gravel. Amadi nodded and stood, readying the container onto her head. As she turned to leave, she felt eyes on her. Across the road, 3 women stood frozen, staring. One covered her mouth. Another shook her head slowly. The third turned and walked away quickly. Amadi's stomach tightened. She knew what this meant. She knew what would follow, but she couldn't undo it now. And deep down, she didn't want to. The next morning, everything changed. Amadi walked to the market to buy Gary and palm oil with a few naira she had earned washing clothes. The woman who usually sold to her glanced up, saw her face, and turned away. "Mama Neka, please, I need Gary," Amadi said quietly. The woman shook her head without looking at her. "Go somewhere else." Amadi moved to the next stall. Same response. And the next. And the next. Her chest tightened. By noon, she had walked the entire market without buying a single thing. People whispered as she passed. Fingers pointed. Eyes judged. When she returned home, empty-handed, her mother looked up from her mat. "What happened, my daughter?" Amadi forced a smile. "They were sold out today, Mama." But her mother knew. That night, Kachi cried from hunger. Amadi boiled the last handful of rice they had and gave it all to him. Her mother refused to eat, insisting Amadi take her portion. Amadi ate 2 spoonfuls and saved the rest for morning. As she lay on her mat that night, staring at the ceiling, she heard her mother's labored breathing grow worse. They needed medicine, but without money, there was none. The whispers grew louder. Everywhere Amadi went, conversations stopped. Children who once played near her compound now ran away. Her usual customers, the ones who paid her to wash clothes or sweep, sent messages through others that her services were no longer needed. One evening, Mama Chitty, an elder from the next compound, came to their door. She didn't enter. She stood outside, arms crossed, her face hard. "Amadi," she said coldly, "you have brought shame to your family. The elders are talking. They say you touched the cursed one. They say misfortune will follow you now and anyone connected to you." Amadi stood silently, her hands clasped in front of her. "I only gave him water, Mama Chitty." "Water?" The woman's voice rose. "You gave life to death itself. That man carries darkness. Everyone knows this. You have invited it into your home." Amadi's mother tried to sit up from her mat. "Please leave my daughter alone. She has done nothing wrong." Mama Chitty ignored her. "Mark my words, this family will suffer." She turned and walked away, her wrapper sweeping dust behind her. 2 days later, Amadi's water container cracked. She had set it down carefully, the same way she always did, but when she returned from hanging laundry, a long split ran down the side. Water leaked onto the ground, forming a dark puddle. She stared at it, her throat tight. Now, she would have to make 2 trips, sometimes 3, carrying smaller buckets. Her back already ached from overwork. This would break her. That afternoon, a child threw a stone near her feet and shouted, "Cursed girl!" Others laughed. Amadi kept walking, her head down. At the river, women moved away when she approached. She filled her bucket in silence, feeling their stares like knives. On her way home, she passed the old man again. He sat under the tree, his eyes closed, his breathing shallow. She wanted to stop, but fear held her back. Fear of losing more. Fear of her family suffering further. She kept walking, but guilt followed her like a shadow. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her mother's cough had worsened. Kachi asked why no one visited them anymore. Amadi had no answers. She couldn't stay away. The next morning, before the sun rose, Amadi filled a small cup with water and walked to the riverbank. The town was still asleep. No one would see. The old man was curled on his side, shivering despite the heat. She knelt beside him and touched his shoulder gently. "Sir," she whispered. He opened his eyes, recognition flickering across his face. She offered him the water. He drank slowly, his hands trembling. When he finished, he looked at her for a long time. "Why do you keep coming?" he asked, his voice weak but clear. Amadi hesitated. "Because you are suffering and no one else will help. They say I am cursed." "Are you?" she asked. He smiled faintly, a sad, broken smile. "No, but suffering makes people believe anything." They sat in silence as the sky turned pink. He told her fragments of his story, a son he hadn't seen in years, a life that fell apart, mistakes he couldn't undo. He didn't explain everything, but Amadi listened. When the sun began to rise, she stood to leave. "Don't come back," he said quietly. "You will lose everything." She looked at him, then at the dying river, then back at him. "I already have." Hunger became their constant companion. Amadi's mother grew weaker, her body thin and frail. Kachi stopped asking for food, his small face gaunt and tired. Amadi sold the last piece of jewelry her father had given her, a simple brass bracelet, for barely enough to buy half a bag of rice. At school, children mocked Kachi openly. "Your sister is friends with the devil," they chanted. He came home with tears streaming down his face, and Amadi held him tightly, whispering lies about how everything would be okay. But she didn't believe them herself. She lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if kindness was supposed to cost this much. She thought about the old man's warning. She thought about her mother's labored breathing. She thought about Kachi's hollow eyes. Maybe the town was right. Maybe she had made a terrible mistake. Maybe compassion was a luxury only the wealthy could afford. The next morning, she decided she wouldn't go back to the riverbank. She would focus on survival, on her family, on what little they had left. But as she swept the compound, guilt gnawed at her insides like a living thing. She broke her promise to herself. That afternoon, she bought a single boiled egg with money mint for kerosene and walked to the river. The old man was slumped against the tree, barely conscious. She knelt and placed the egg in his hand. His eyes opened slowly, and when he saw what she'd brought, tears filled them. He couldn't speak. He just stared at the egg, then at her, then back at the egg. "Eat, sir," she whispered. He peeled it slowly, his hands shaking, and ate in small bites, as if each one was a prayer. When he finished, he looked at her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "You should not have come back," he said, his voice breaking. "Why?" she asked. "Because kindness like yours, it delays the inevitable." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He shook his head. "Stay away from me, child. For your own sake. I'm not worth your suffering." But even as he said it, his eyes betrayed him. They held gratitude so deep it hurt to see. Amadi stood slowly, brushing dust from her knees. "I'll be back tomorrow," she said softly. He closed his eyes and whispered something she couldn't hear. The town's hostility reached a breaking point. Children no longer threw stones near her feet. They threw them at her. Women spat when she passed. Men cursed her name openly. One afternoon, a group of young men blocked her path. "You think you're better than us?" one sneered. "Helping that demon?" Amadi tried to walk around them, but they moved to block her. "Leave me alone," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "Or what?" Another laughed. "You'll curse us too?" They didn't touch her, but their words were violence enough. She walked past them with her head high, even as her hands trembled. That evening, the town elders called a meeting under the big tree in the market square. Amadi wasn't invited, but everyone knew it was about her. Her mother begged her not to go, but Amadi went anyway. She stood at the edge of the crowd, silent, listening. "This girl has brought shame upon Obodo," one elder declared. "She has defied our warnings and aligned herself with darkness." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering. "What shall we do?" another asked. The crowd's response was clear: make her leave. That night, Amadi knelt by the riverbank, alone in the darkness. The water barely moved, a dying whisper against dry stone. She closed her eyes and prayed, not to any specific god, but to the universe itself. "If kindness is wrong, then I don't understand this world," she whispered. "If helping someone means losing everything, then what is the point of anything?" No answer came. Only silence. Only the soft rustle of wind through the acacia tree. She stayed there for a long time, her hands pressed together, her heart heavy with exhaustion. When she finally opened her eyes, she felt no peace. No clarity. Just the same crushing weight she'd carried for weeks. She stood to leave, brushing dirt from her knees. That's when she heard it. A voice. Faint. Weak. Calling her name. She turned sharply. The old man was lying near the tree, his arm outstretched, his face twisted in pain. "Amadi," he gasped. She ran to him, her heart pounding. "Sir, what's wrong?" His breathing was shallow, his skin cold despite the heat. I can't. His eyes rolled back. His body went limp. Sir, please wake up. Amadi shook him gently, panic rising in her chest. He didn't respond. His chest barely moved. She looked around desperately, but the riverbank was empty. No one came here at night. She couldn't carry him alone. She ran toward the nearest compound, pounding on doors, begging for help. Please, someone. The old man is dying. Doors remained closed. A woman shouted from inside. Let him die. Don't bring his curse here. Amadi's vision blurred with tears. She ran back to him, knelt beside his still body, and pressed her ear to his chest. A faint heartbeat. Still alive. Barely. She tore a piece of cloth from her wrapper, soaked it in the shallow river water, and pressed it to his forehead. She stayed with him through the night, whispering prayers, begging him to hold on. By morning, his breathing had steadied slightly, but he was still unconscious. Amadi's body ached from exhaustion, but she didn't leave. She couldn't. As the sun rose, casting pale light across the riverbank, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. 3 men stood there, staring. One pointed at her. She's trying to save him. By midday, the entire town knew. Amadi had spent the night with the cursed man. Alone, caring for him, defying every warning, every threat, every rule. A crowd gathered near the riverbank, keeping their distance but watching with morbid curiosity. Mama Chitty pushed through the crowd, her face twisted with fury. Amadi, what have you done? Amadi stood slowly, placing herself between the old man and the crowd. I stayed with him because no one else would. You have sealed your fate, girl, Mama Chitty hissed. If he dies here, his blood is on your hands. If he lives, his curse is on your family. Amadi's voice was steady, but her eyes burned. He is not cursed. He is human, just like you. The crowd murmured. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked angrier. Then someone shouted, "A car is coming." Everyone turned. In the distance, a black vehicle moved slowly down the dirt road toward the river. It was sleek, expensive, completely out of place in this forgotten town. The crowd fell silent. The car stopped near the gathering. 2 men stepped out, dressed in crisp shirts and sunglasses. They looked around, then approached the elders. We're looking for someone, one said. An old man, missing for 2 years. The elders exchanged nervous glances. What old man? One asked cautiously. The stranger pulled out a photograph and held it up. It showed a man in a suit, smiling, standing beside a tall building. The face was younger, healthier, but unmistakable. It was him, the homeless man by the river. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mama Chitty's face went pale. The stranger scanned the gathering, his eyes landing on Amadi, standing protectively over the old man's body. Is that him? He asked, pointing. Amadi nodded slowly. The 2 men moved quickly, pushing through the crowd. When they reached the old man, they knelt beside him with a reverence that shocked everyone watching. One checked his pulse. The other pulled out a phone and made a call. We found him, he said urgently. Send the medical team. Now. The crowd stood frozen, disbelief written on every face. Who was this man? Why did these strangers treat him like he mattered? The stranger looked up at Amadi. How long has he been like this? Since last night, she whispered. I stayed with him. His expression softened. You saved his life. Within minutes, the town erupted into chaos. People who had spat at the old man now craned their necks to see him. Those who had cursed Amadi now whispered frantically among themselves. Did you hear? They said he's someone important. I always thought there was something strange about him. Maybe we were wrong. Fear spread faster than truth. The elders gathered in a tight circle, whispering urgently, realizing too late that they had rejected someone powerful. Mama Chitty, who had been the loudest in condemning Amadi, now stood at the edge of the crowd, silent, her face ashen. A medical van arrived, equipped with supplies the town had never seen. Paramedics lifted the old man onto a stretcher with careful hands. Amadi watched, still kneeling in the dust, her body trembling from exhaustion. One of the strangers approached her. What's your name? Amadi, she whispered. He wrote it down. We'll need to speak with you later. You may have saved a very important man. Before she could respond, the paramedics loaded the old man into the van. As they closed the doors, his eyes opened briefly. He looked directly at Amadi, and he smiled. The van drove away, leaving the crowd in stunned silence. Slowly, people began to disperse, their whispers carrying shame and confusion. Amadi stood alone by the river, staring at the empty space where the old man had lain. Her legs felt weak. Her chest felt hollow. She had no idea what had just happened. That evening, the strangers returned. This time, they came to her compound. Amadi's mother sat up on her mat, alarmed. Kachi hid behind his sister. The lead stranger removed his sunglasses and spoke gently. Amadi, the man you helped, is named Chief Okonkwo. He disappeared 2 years ago after a family tragedy. His son has been searching for him ever since. Amadi's heart pounded. His son? Yes, the man said. His son is Victor Okonkwo, CEO of Okonkwo Industries, one of the wealthiest men in the country. The air left Amadi's lungs. The stranger continued. Chief Okonkwo had a mental breakdown after his wife died. He wandered away from home and ended up here. His family thought he was dead, but you kept him alive. Amadi couldn't speak. Her mother clutched her chest, tears streaming down her face. My daughter saved him. The old man, Chief Okonkwo, was taken to a private hospital in the city. Within days, his condition stabilized. His mind, clouded for so long, began to clear. The doctors were amazed at his recovery, attributing it not just to medical care, but to the will to live that someone had rekindled in him. His son, Victor Okonkwo, sat beside his father's hospital bed, holding his frail hand. Papa, Victor whispered, tears streaming down his face. I thought I'd lost you forever. Chief Okonkwo's eyes opened slowly. He stared at his son for a long moment, as if trying to place him. Then recognition flickered. Victor, he rasped. My son. They embraced, both men weeping. After a long silence, Victor asked the question that had haunted him. Papa, how did you survive out there? Who helped you? Chief Okonkwo's eyes grew distant. A girl, he whispered. A girl gave me water when I was dying. She came back again and again, even when her town turned against her. She stayed with me through the night when I collapsed. She's the reason I'm alive. Victor's jaw tightened. What's her name? Amadi. Victor returned to Obodo 3 days later. This time, he came in person. His convoy of black SUVs rolled into the town like a storm, kicking up dust and drawing every eye. He stepped out wearing a tailored suit, his presence commanding immediate attention. The elders rushed to greet him, suddenly hospitable, suddenly smiling. Victor ignored them. Where is Amadi? He asked coldly. Someone pointed toward her compound. Victor walked there alone, his footsteps deliberate. When he reached the small, crumbling house, he found Amadi outside, sweeping the compound as she always did. She looked up, startled. You're Victor Okonkwo, she stammered. And you're Amadi, he said, his voice softer now. The girl who saved my father. She looked down, uncomfortable with the attention. I only did what anyone should do, sir. No, Victor said firmly. You did what no one else would do. My father told me everything. How you gave him water when you had barely enough for your family. How you brought him food when you were starving. How you stayed with him when he collapsed, even though your town wanted you gone. Amadi's eyes filled with tears. I couldn't just leave him, sir. Victor stepped closer. Why? Why did you help him when it cost you everything? Amadi wiped her eyes and spoke quietly. Because he was suffering, and suffering should matter, even when no one is watching. Victor stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to the crowd that had gathered behind him. The entire town had followed, watching from a distance. Do all of you know what she did? Victor's voice carried over the compound. She gave water to a dying man you all abandoned. She fed him when she was starving. She protected him when you called him cursed. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some looked at the ground. Others whispered. Victor's voice grew harder. My father was mentally ill. He needed help. Instead, you created rumors. You spread fear. You punished the one person brave enough to show him kindness. Mama Chitty tried to step forward. Sir, we didn't know. You didn't care to know. Victor cut her off. You saw suffering and turned away. She saw suffering and ran toward it. He turned back to Amadi. Because of you, my father is alive. Because of you, I have my father back. I can never repay that debt, but I will spend the rest of my life trying. Victor knelt in the dust before Amadi. The crowd gasped. A man of his wealth, his status, kneeling before a poor village girl. My name is Victor Okonkwo, he said, his voice thick with emotion. My father is Chief Okonkwo, founder of Okonkwo Industries. Our company operates in 15 countries. We employ over 10,000 people. My father built it all from nothing. He paused, his eyes locked on Amadi's. When my mother died, he broke. He walked away from everything, and I couldn't find him. For 2 years, I searched. I hired investigators. I offered rewards. I prayed every night that he was still alive. His voice cracked, and then I got a call 3 days ago. They found him, alive, because of you. Amadi's mother sobbed from inside the house. Kachi stared wide-eyed. The crowd stood frozen. You gave him water when you had none to spare, Victor continued. You gave him food when you were hungry. You gave him dignity when everyone else gave him shame. You are the reason I still have a father. He stood slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. And now, the world needs to know your name. The town square fell into a heavy silence. No one spoke. No one moved. Victor's words hung in the air like a judgment no one could escape. Slowly, people began to lower their heads. Mama Chitty, who had been the loudest voice against Amadi, stood trembling, her face wet with tears. We were wrong, she whispered. God forgive us, we were so wrong. Others murmured agreements, their voices thick with shame. But no one approached Amadi. No one begged for forgiveness. They simply stood there, carrying the weight of what they had done. Victor turned to his assistant. Document everything. Every person who refused to help. Every person who mocked her. Every person who turned their back. The assistant nodded, taking notes. The crowd shifted nervously. Victor looked back at Amadi. You will never suffer again. Not because of me, but because of what you did. Real kindness always finds its reward. It just takes time. He gestured toward his convoy. Come with me. There's someone who wants to see you. Amadi hesitated, looking at her mother and brother. Victor smiled gently. Them too. Your family comes with you. Always. Within a week, Amadi's life transformed in ways she could never have imagined. Victor arranged for her mother to receive the best medical care available. Within days, her fever broke. Her strength returned. The doctors said she would recover fully. Kachi was enrolled in a private school, with uniforms, books, and meals provided. He cried the first day, overwhelmed by kindness he'd never known. Amadi herself was offered a full scholarship to university. Study whatever you want, Victor said. Your future is yours now. But the greatest gift came quietly. Victor sat with Amadi one evening on the veranda of the new house he'd built for her family. My father wants to see you, he said. They drove to the hospital. Chief Okonkwo was sitting up, looking healthier, stronger. When Amadi entered, his face lit up. My daughter, he said, his voice clear. You gave me life when I had none left. You saw me when I was invisible. Amadi knelt beside his bed, tears streaming. I'm just glad you're alive, sir. He took her hand. You are more than kind, child. You are proof that goodness still exists in this world. Victor stood at the door, watching them, and in that moment, he made a decision. A month later, Victor visited Amadi at her new home. He looked nervous, uncharacteristically unsure of himself. Amadi, he began, I need to tell you something. She looked at him curiously. What is it, sir? Don't call me sir, he said softly. Please. He took a deep breath. When I first met you, I was grateful. You saved my father. You gave me back the most important person in my life. But as I've watched you these past weeks, I've seen something more. Amadi's heart began to race. I've seen your strength, Victor continued. Your humility, the way you care for your family. The way you still greet people who rejected you with kindness. You could be bitter, angry, but you're not. He stepped closer. Amadi, I don't just admire you. I respect you in a way I've never respected anyone. He paused, his eyes searching hers. I know this is sudden. I know we come from different worlds, but those worlds don't matter to me anymore. What matters is character, and yours is unlike anything I've ever seen. He knelt, just as he had in the town square. Amadi, will you let me spend my life learning from you? Will you marry me? Amadi stared at him, her mind spinning. A billionaire CEO, kneeling before her, asking her to marry him. It felt impossible, unreal, like a story someone would tell around a fire. But his eyes were sincere, his voice steady. This wasn't gratitude. This was something deeper. Victor, she whispered, I'm just a girl from a river town. I have nothing to offer you. You have everything, he replied. You have the one thing money can't buy. A heart that sees people, truly sees them, even when the world looks away. Tears streamed down her face. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. She nodded slowly. Yes. 6 months later, they were married in a ceremony that brought together two worlds. The town of Obodo was invited, every single person. Some came with shame in their eyes. Others came with joy. Amadi forgave them all. Chief Okonkwo walked her down the aisle, tears in his eyes. You saved my life, he whispered. Now you've saved my son's too. As Amadi stood beside Victor, her hand in his, she remembered the day she gave water to a dying man. She remembered the cost, the hunger, the rejection, the loneliness. But she also remembered his eyes when he drank, the gratitude, the humanity, and she realized something profound. True kindness, offered when no one is watching, carries the power to change destiny. Not just for the one who receives it, but for the one who gives it too. The river that had once been dying now flowed strong again. And Amadi, the girl no one noticed, became the woman everyone remembered. Thank you for watching this story of faith, kindness, and destiny. Amadi's life reminds us that our greatest blessings often come disguised as our hardest tests. Do you believe that kindness always finds its reward? Tell us in the comments below. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe so you never miss another powerful tale that restores hope. See you in the next story.